Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to my classmate and colleagues for hosting us this evening for the Congressional Black Caucus's Special Order Hour. Mr. Speaker, during the past month, we honored the great achievements and rich history of African Americans and the African American community. We reflected on the unfortunate journey through slavery and segregation, prejudices and discrimination. Though we bring Black History Month to a close, the Congressional Black Caucus will continue to fight for justice. Tonight, our Special Order Hour is Bridging the Divide, observations on race and justice in America. Our attention to the divides in our society, however, does not end because we entered a new month. We must remain focused on how we can bridge the divides in our society and how we can bring our nation closer together. The divides are striking, and we know them all too well. The school pipeline to prison, the prison pipeline, education disparities, health disparities, the injustices in our justice system. It is well established, in fact, that students of color face harsher punishments in schools than their white peers, leading to a higher number of youth of color in detention, suspension, and yes, expelled. Mr. Speaker, African American students are arrested far more than their white classmates. Black and Hispanic students represent more than 70% of those involved in school-related arrests or referrals to law enforcement. Currently, African Americans make up 2/5 and Hispanics 1/5 of confined youth today. Disparities are found not only in how we punish behavior in schools, but also how we fund education. Mr. Speaker, this is true in K through 12. It is also true in higher education, and we know that a college degree is a path to a middle-class life. As African American students graduate with more debt than their white classmates, the cuts to Pell Grants are threatening African American access to a better education. Without the Pell Grant program, hundreds of thousands of young African Americans would not be able to afford college. The disparities in access to health coverage are startling. The infant mortality rate among African Americans is 2.3 times that of non-Hispanic whites, and African American infants are 4 times more likely than non-Hispanic white infants to die, mostly due to complications related to birth weight. We must confront these prejudices, these injustices in our nation head on. The Congressional Black Caucus is committed to resolving these challenges. The Congressional Black Caucus has fought to ensure funding the Pell Grants. Pell Grants are contained in each year's appropriations bills. We have worked hard to make sure that the maternity and newborn care are part of health care plans under the Affordable Care Act. Over 390,000 African American women are in the individual market alone and are projected to gain maternity coverage thanks to the Affordable Care Act. Our task force on the elimination of sentencing disparities is moving the ball on how Black men and women are treated in the judicial system. And we have been working here in Congress. Our partners, the Deltas, my sorority, Delta Sigma Theta sorority, held their annual Deltas in the nation's capital today, with thousands of women from across this nation gathering, advocating for these same disparities and injustices. As Deltas were uniting in their efforts today in our nation's capital, My sorors and I were also uniting for one of our very own, nominee Loretta Lynch. Last week, the Senate Judiciary Committee voted 12-8 to approve the confirmation of Loretta Lynch as the next United States Attorney General, bringing her confirmation to the full Senate for consideration. I remember it all too well a couple weeks before that, when we were in that hearing room and it looked like a sea of red as deltas marched in and lined up one after another, wearing our colors crimson and cream. Deltas lined the outside of the hearing room. And Mr. Speaker, we did that because prior to entering that room, media and some of my colleagues on the other side had tried to make it a bad thing that she organized and was a founder of her college chapter of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. But what we were able to do was to show them when we work together, whether that's Democrats and Republicans, or sorority members or non-sorority members, when it's the right thing to do, we can make a difference. I was so proud last week to sit there on the front row with my other colleagues, with our chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congressman G.K. Butterfield, with the 100th woman sworn into the United States Congress, Congresswoman Alma Adams, to be there with the 21st National President of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, Congresswoman Marcia Fudge. We sat there next to Loretta Lynch's father, the Reverend Lorenzo Lynch of North Carolina, while the Judiciary Committee favorably reported the nomination on a vote that was closer than it needed to be. Mrs. Lynch's nomination is well-deserved and historic. Ms. Lynch testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee for nearly 8 hours, and she responded to nearly 900 written questions, which is unprecedented. Many of the written questions, Mr. Speaker, were from senators who had already declared their opposition to her nomination. Ms. Lynch's nomination has now been pending far longer than any recent Attorney General's nomination, which in my opinion, Mr. Speaker, is shameful. She deserves to be voted our next Attorney General. If senators have a reason to vote against her nomination, they should make their case public. Yes, hiding behind procedural tactics does not help our nation. As the Senate has an opportunity to unite behind a well-qualified nominee for a critical position, Congress members will have an opportunity to be united this weekend when Democrats and Republicans will travel to Alabama to march to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Selma marches. 50 years ago, people marched for equal voting rights. Out of those marches, we got the Voting Rights Act. However, disparities remain, and the Voting Rights Act has been eroded. We can end this divide, Mr. Speaker, of who votes if my Republican colleagues would vote and bring up the Voting Rights Amendment Act, H.R. 885. Let me say that again, Mr. Speaker. We can end the divide of who can vote if my Republican colleagues would bring up the Voting Rights Amendment Act, H.R. 885. How long will it take? How long must we wait to have equal rights and justice? It is well past time that we deliver to all Americans what they deserve. Like we did 50 years ago in Selma, we must do so again today and stand united, arm in arm, as my Congressional Black Caucus colleagues and I did recently in Ferguson, and as we will do tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Together, united, we can bring an end to the disparities that hold our hard-working families back from achieving the middle-class dream and the dreams of all Americans, that we should be equal. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Thank you to the